Welcome, everyone. This is episode 6 of Sharpen Up. I'm your host, JC Bruce, with my co-host, Ron Rollins. Hey, Ron.
Jeff, how are you?
Doing good. Today, we're going to talk about events in the month of April. I put out a newsletter every month at the beginning of every month that you can sign up for. There'll be more on that at the end of this podcast, in which we take note of the significant events during the course of every month. This month, we've got Easter, of course. We have Earth Day. We're also celebrating the anniversary of Ponce de Leon claiming to have discovered Florida. It's also Adopt a Ferret Month, and Blah, Blah, Blah Day is coming up, ironically, on the same day as Easter. So we're going to kick the can a little bit on all of these things. What do you want to start with, Ron? You want to start with...
I have a ferret story, actually.
Okay, I want to hear your ferret story. Now, have you ever owned a ferret?
I have not owned a ferret. Well, this is not exactly a ferret story, but for the purposes of this story, I'm going to either claim or pretend to actually believe that ferrets and squirrels are in the same general animal class and family, right? Because this is actually a squirrel story. So about 3 years ago, I am at a gas station in Kettering here, where I live in suburban Dayton. And there's this older gentleman, which I have terminology I now have to be careful how I use at this point in my life, but he's older than me, and he's getting his gas. As I recall, he's wearing kind of overalls and kind of a gimme cap, and he's getting his gas, and he's got kind of an older Dodge Caravan like right in front of me, and so I can see in the back of his car as I'm getting my gas, and he seems like a regular guy, and I look in, and there's something moving in his car, and I can see through the back windshield of his car something jumping around, and I'm like, what is that? And it's a squirrel. The guy apparently drives around town with a pet squirrel loose in his car. Now, I don't know if it was just jumping around because dad was not in the car to control it, or if it calmly sits on his lap or something while he drives and it doesn't bounce around. But I want our people in viewerland to imagine the distraction of driving down the street in your community with a live squirrel jumping around while you're trying to not hit other cars. Anyway, that's my story.
So do you think, Ron, do you think that, having a squirrel, or since this is Adopt a Ferret Month, a ferret for that matter, running around loose in your car is a greater distraction than, say, texting?
I as much as I am opposed to texting while driving, I am going to hazard to say that I believe personally that having a live squirrel jumping around in your car while you're driving very well could be more distracting than texting while driving, because your phone does not have sharp claws that it can embed into the soft flesh of your neck while you're driving.
Yes, but squirrels are, I don't know if squirrels are known to do that, but ferrets, in fact, are known to do that.
Ferrets are. And in fact, at another podcast, perhaps someday, I'll tell the story of the time that a squirrel got loose in our house that came down the chimney. And Amy and I tried to catch it with a box, and it didn't go well. So we survived. That was bad enough. We weren't driving. So
the one thing I'll mention is I don't know anything about ferrets. I've never owned a ferret, but the only thing I've ever read about ferrets is from this short story called The King of the Ferret Leggers, and I included a link to that.
That's right, you did.
In my newsletter. Yeah,
that's right.
It's a wonderful story, and it's true. There is this sport. I think it's up in Canada.
Yes.
Canadians do these sort of odd things, like they're the ones that invented axe throwing instead of dart throwing. I think now all of a sudden there's axe throwing bars everywhere. We've even got one here in Naples.
We have one in downtown Dayton.
Yeah. It's just, I've never been to one myself, but
there's something in me. The old assistant scoutmaster in me sort of comes bubbling back up to the surface when I think of encouraging people to throw axes. There were enough things that we had to talk the young scouts out of doing at camp. Throwing axes may have or may not have been one of them, that I kind of get a bad jolt in my stomach when I think of encouraging or paying to throw axes. But I'm sure people
But
do it.
especially while you're
I've been told
drinking,
it's
I mean,
fun.
what could go wrong?
What
You
could go
know?
wrong?
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
Yeah. Well,
We
anyway,
do
in
have
this
one, yeah.
in this in ferret legging, what they do is, first of all, it's a sport for gentlemen, but I'm assuming ladies could play too. Although generally speaking, I give women more credit for more sense than that.
Yeah.
And what the guys do is they wear long pants. They don't wear underwear. That's I think a key part of all of this. And they
Right.
tie the ends of their around their ankles, tighten them up. Then they drop a ferret down their pants, tighten the belt, and then the contest is whoever can take it the longest wins. Okay. So,
Okay.
yeah, right. So that's all I know
uh,
about ferrets. And in the course of the story, they talk about just how awful that experience is. So I've never really had this great, sense of ferrets as kind of a playful pet that I'd want hanging around. Certainly not crawling around my person, but
well, I
or for
think
that matter, on your dashboard or under your
I was
feet in
going to
your
say
car.
I think it brings to mind the concept of ferret abuse. Actually,
Yeah,
I think we're seeing this from the point of view of the human participants, being that we are more human than ferret. However, although I have been accused of being a ferret, I believe at one point in my column writing days, I believe a reader called me a ferret or ferret face or something like that. But we are not seeing this, I don't think, fairly from the point of view of the poor ferrets who are being, first of all, rounded up and captured against their will, and then number two, unceremoniously dumped into a dark, confined, and unfortunately, perhaps in some cases, moist place to scramble around and hope for the best
Yeah.
until they're released after a certain amount of what we may assume to be jangling. Let's just say this is an unfortunate story, Jeff, and I'm sad now.
No, I mean, I thought about that as well. That, I mean, yeah, it sounds like it's a funny story, but think about the poor ferrets. Well, what Adopt a Ferret Month wants us to understand is that ferrets are actually, they make
People too.
wonderful little pets.
That's right.
Domesticated ferrets are fun-loving pets. I mean, and yeah, they've got sharp teeth and claws, but so do cats. So so do
Don't get me
dogs.
started. I'm allergic to cats. I will change this slightly to be briefly a Canadian anecdote. We had an experience, a Canadian experience this week in Dayton at the theater. My wife and I went and saw the play "Come From Away," which at the downtown in Dayton, performed by the Dayton Live crew. Are you familiar with it?
I am.
It's have you seen it? It's a
No.
terrific play. It was the one that beat out, or the one that lost to Dear Evan Hansen for the Tony a couple of years ago. We saw Dear Evan Hansen also too, and we did not like it at all. We kind of actually left in the middle because it seemed to be kind of like Teen Suicide, the musical. We were not into it. But Come From Away is a wonderful play. And if viewers are not familiar with it, strongly recommend tracking it down somewhere, YouTube or something, or go see it if it's near you. It's the story of all the planes after 9/11 that got rerouted to the airport in Gander, Newfoundland. And they had like 17,000 stranded people from all over the world, from like 50 or 60 airliners that ended up like piling into this town of like 7,000 people in the middle of nowhere, and how the people of Gander rose up to take care of these people, and they made them all want to be. The moral of the story is all of these people ended up wanting to stay and become Canadians.
Yeah, we all wish we
because
were Canadians,
they
right?
were so
Yes.
well treated, and they were
Yeah.
so smitten by the wonderful care that these beautiful Canadian people gave to them. It's absolutely heartwarming. And Amy and I went into it thinking like, this is about 9/11, but it's really not. It's a great play. It's really good. So anyway, that's no more ferrets. Yay Canada, go go go.
Well,
Yep.
speaking of foreign lands, April is also the month that Ponce de Leon discovered, we use the word advisedly, Florida.
Right.
That probably came as a moment of celebration for all the indigenous people in what is now the state of Florida to be discovered. I'm sure they all had visions of Hollywood contracts lining up because everybody wants to be discovered. So Ponce de Leon shows up. Let's see, I've got my newsletter here. Let's see if I can.
I think you say April 2nd, 1513.
1513, yes,
Yeah.
1513. Ponce de Leon shows up. And like a lot of the early Spanish explorers, he was looking for riches, the fountain of youth, and a way to enslave native tribes to do labor for him. One of the stories that doesn't get told very often about Ponce de Leon is that he happened to be exploring this side of Florida where I live, which is on the lower west coast. Basically, if you're familiar with where Fort Lauderdale is, go the opposite side of the state, and that's where Naples is. And just north of us is the town of Fort Myers, where Thomas Edison hung out.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yep. Oh, yeah. There's a big Thomas Edison museum in Fort Myers. It's way cool.
Well, you know, he was born in Milan, Ohio, which is up near Lake Erie. Yeah.
Yet another Ohio-Florida connection.
I know.
So,
I know.
Yeah. So anyway, Ponce de Leon shows up on one of his trips and decides that he's going to come and grab him some Calusa, which were the indigenous tribe here, and put them to work for him. But he underestimated them. They showed up in canoes, went out to his boat. A conflict ensued, and Ponce de Leon took a poisoned arrow in the ass. And so the Spanish fled. They fled down to Cuba, where they had headquarters, and that's where he died. So this is the tragic end of Ponce de Leon, who, quote unquote, discovered Florida. Right. So advice to all of you would-be tourists coming to Florida. Florida can be an adventurous place. So we have pythons and panthers and gators and crocodiles, and we have Floridians. So, you know. Yeah.
And I would argue and suggest that people who come to Florida are still looking for the fountain of youth even today, one way or another. I present you Disney World. So yes.
Or the villages.
Yes, or the entire state. I'm going to go out on a limb here and suggest that there were a lot fewer strip malls and marinas in Florida in 1513 than there are now, probably.
Right, but there probably were still ambitious developers waiting in the wings to find a way to strip mine and rip out all the mangroves.
Right. Look at this beach view. There were. I know, and the manatees did not have to worry about getting hit by powerboat propellers back then, because Ponce de Leon.
Right. They may have got popped on the head with an oar, but not a sailing ship. Not a propeller. Well, listen, April is also, I mean, we know April is also the month this year that Easter falls in.
And as you mentioned in your newsletter, Easter has a special significance this year, Jeff.
Yes, it also falls on blah, blah, blah day. So, and we do not want to, and here at the Sharpen Up podcast, we do not make light of religious faith, although it is kind of weird that blah, blah, blah day and Easter coincide on the same Sunday, April 17th. And that's correct. We should probably explain what blah, blah, blah day is.
We should probably explain what Easter is, but
we should probably do both.
Let's start with blah, blah, blah day.
Okay, well, it's like all of these made up holidays. There's probably 30 or 40 made up holidays. I know, right?
Jeff,
I know. For every month.
Make up holidays?
Yes. And blah, blah, blah day is the day you're supposed to take out the trash, stop smoking, lose weight, pick up your clothes, get a job, quit your job, clean your fingernails, whatever. It's one of these catch-all days, right? So, and it's always on April 17th. What's coincidental is that Easter is on April 17th. And as we know, it's almost impossible to know from one year to the next when Easter is going to be because of what some people might consider to be the unconventional way in which the holiday is scheduled.
Correct.
So if you're a member of the Christian faith, you can reliably count on December 25th is the day in which the birth of Jesus of Nazareth is celebrated. then why is it that the day on which his storied resurrection from the dead is not also on the same day every year?
I would have to go to Wikipedia to know this. I should have be able to call it up from my early Christian education, but it has to fall on a Sunday, and it's the first Sunday after, I forget. I don't know.
It is the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox. So
I think it's much easier to simply remember it as the first Sunday after Palm Sunday.
Right, but yes, that's certainly true. And when is Palm Sunday?
The Sunday before Easter. I don't want to. I don't want to get too tautology here, but that would, yeah, that's correct.
Well, okay. So here's the answer. This is straight from the newsletter.
Okay.
Confusion traces its roots back to the Council of Nicaea in the year 325 AD.
This is before the Roman Empire even fell, right?
Before the Roman Empire fell, and the early Christians wanted to figure out, hey, when are we going to celebrate this? You know, we have to have a date. And there was this big debate. There was this big council of Nicaea. They all got together and nobody could agree because the Christians in Syria thought that the celebration or the recognition of this event should take place in coordination with Passover. And but the Roman Christians said, no, it's got to be on a Sunday. Well, of course, that's not going to be the same day every year. Right. So the Roman Christians won, the Syrian Christians lost the debate. And that's how we came up with this, basically what's a full employment act for astronomers to calculate when Easter is supposed to be every year. So it just so happens that this year Easter falls on blah blah
day, right?
That's the tail of the tape on that.
Well, for all the small children who may find a ferret in their Easter baskets this year, here's to them. I salute them.
That's right. Okay, so we should probably. There's at least one more thing we need to discuss, and that is Earth Day.
You know, actually, before we go to Earth Day, though, I do want to remind people that April is National Poetry Month. That's right.
It is?
It is April. And I just mentioned that because I read a lot of poetry and I write a little bit. So, yeah.
I don't even know if I mentioned that in my newsletter.
I'm not sure if you did.
I'm thinking this could be a major, this could be a major lapse here.
No, I would not consider it a major omission. No, I think National Poetry Day stands, or National Poetry Month stands on its own without the need for extra adulation. I think millions of people around the nation rise up on National Poetry Month and start speaking in verse. And they do, and automatically. And so they did not need the excellent prompting of the Sharpen Up newsletter to make them already begin speaking in tongues. They were already doing it. So.
It is actually Jazz Appreciation Month. It's National Heartworm Awareness Month, National Pecan Month, or is it pecan? What do we say up in Ohio?
We say pecan.
Pecan, okay. Yeah. It's Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Month, which is a nice segue back to our conversation about ferrets.
Apparently they don't.
Library Month, Straw Hat Month, Testicular Cancer Awareness Month.
That's a big one. That's a big
one.
Well, you know, you could probably combine the ferret event with never mind. I'm sorry. kill two birds with one stone, as it were.
Okay.
The ferret's down there.
Clarify.
No. Just suppose you got a highly educated ferret who, you know, was up on his medical. Never forget it. Move on.
Right, we're not going to go there, right?
We did already. It's too late.
Okay, we did. All right. Okay. Well, we should make note. April 22nd is Earth Day.
Yes.
It has been celebrated ever since 1970.
Yep.
I doing just a little additional research this morning before our podcast. I noted that on Earth Day this year, you can anticipate more than 1 billion people around the planet engaged
No.
in activities associated with recognition of the perils to our environment, which is pretty impressive. In fact, it is, in terms of participation, international participation, it's the biggest holiday of the year.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I was 10 years old in 1970. I remember it being a big deal that there was this creation of this new a holiday, not a holiday, but a special day of awareness. I mean, I grew up in Oberlin, which was a very liberal little enclave in northern Ohio where Oberlin College is. and I remember at school we made a big deal out of it. Earth Day was always a big deal for the next couple of years into late elementary school, junior high school, and Earth Day fairs, and Oberlin had a little parade downtown and a little festival and stuff. And I remember it being a very big deal very early on. And I kind of have a fondness for it, actually. It was, at first when I was little, I thought it was like an Oberlin thing. I didn't realize, probably when I was 10 or 11 years old, that it was, an international thing. But Oberlin was so weird anyway that I figured it was just something we did in Oberlin. But I think Earth Day is pretty cool, and I'm surprised actually that it has that much that much adherence or that much recognition, as you mentioned in the.
Well, what's interesting is that it really came about. This is interesting. It's in the height of the Vietnam War. We're still in Vietnam. Rachel Carson, some years before, had published her book Silent Spring. And people began, there was this general awakening to the sense that, hey, we've got real environmental problems in this country. I mean, we were using leaded gasoline that was, filling the atmosphere with vaporized lead, right? And so you can look at the awareness of this to a whole range of reforms that have taken place over the years, from the Clean Water Act to
clean air,
and all of these things. And it all predates the general understanding about climate change and global warming. So now, of course, you layer that on top, and it sort of clouds everything else in terms of, the dire threats that we face to our environment. So I think it's a wonderful thing that we're able to do this. Now, if we could just use that as a nucleus around which to build an even stronger coalition to actually get some things done to try to mitigate climate change, that would be a marvelous thing, right?
It would. I confess that I at times, and this is something I run across in my general news and opinion reading a lot, is the kind of catch-22 that people face between wanting to do something and knowing what that thing is that they should do to mitigate or advance the climate change cause and do something about it. And I don't know, do you have thoughts on that? I remember my two grown kids having a vigorous debate last time we were on vacation on climate change. My son arguing that it was, it mattered at the individual level, that people as individuals, had to do things that they could do, whether it's recycling, drive less, bike more. I mean, whatever, control the amount of air conditioning you use in your house, that kind of thing. And then my daughter, who's a lawyer, argued vigorously on the other side. And while she does all those things, argued strenuously that individuals' actions can't possibly add up to what corporations need to be doing themselves. And she put the need for change squarely on corporations, because their ability to mitigate was so many times larger in scale than what individuals could do. And I remember thinking, first of all, I had to separate them because they really got into it. Second of all, I remember thinking that until they had, my wife and I talked later, about listening to your grown kids have that kind of intelligent back and forth, and how proud we were of them on the one hand, but on the other hand too, it really framed it for us in a way that we hadn't even thought about ourselves, of that difference. It's easy to kind of just go like, well, what do we do? You know, how do you fix this? How do you address it? How do you help? I don't know. It's a tough one.
Well, I think I would agree with both of your kids. The answer is yes and
Yeah.
yes, but the third layer in there is what we expect of our governments to actually make this happen. I mean, capitalism left alone isn't going to do it. Even, you know, I agree with your daughter. I mean, that's where change has to take place.
Right.
However, you're not in a capitalist society, you're not going to get businesses to do it unless there's a level playing field in which all businesses in the sectors they're engaged in are required to do it. And that requires regulation. And so, I mean, we have had a history over the last few decades of increasing regulation to try to address this. I do think, I mean, I think we should be pleased at some level that we, at the governmental level, and I think at the popular level, there is increasing awareness of that. Yeah, it makes sense to make some changes. Nobody likes the fact that suddenly the price of gasoline is higher. I mean, look what they've been doing in Europe for years. The price of gasoline in Europe has always been higher than it is here because they're trying to encourage people. First of all, it's a source of revenue to tax it, but also because in so doing, they encourage people to drive smaller cars that use less fuel, all of which works towards that goal. And we haven't, so when we started, you know, enacting fuel economy standards in this country, what are we doing? We're basically saying we are addressing climate change by trying to do that. I think the whole electric car phenomenon, what is happening is just, frankly, it leaves me a bit gobsmacked that in the course of, I mean, when did the first Tesla come out?
Oh gosh, it's been a while.
Should know that if we're, you know, for purposes of this conversation, but it has only been a few years, right? In terms of, and suddenly everybody's making electric cars. Suddenly, you know, the trend is clear that gasoline powered vehicles are pretty much going to go the way of the dodo bird here, maybe within the decade.
Right.
You know,
certainly within a generation. Yeah.
So what a huge change that is and how rapidly it is coming. So, you know, I'm actually kind of more optimistic than pessimistic about what the future can hold. But yeah, we all got to do our part, and we have to insist that the government does its part. I mean, it was only just a few years ago that I was having debates with you know, with people about, is climate change real?
Right.
I mean, I don't hear those debates anymore. I don't hear those arguments anymore.
Well, not amongst the circles you and I would travel in, I think, but I think there's a broader thing. I am always, to your point about optimism, I'm always encouraged when we go to visit the kids in Chicago. From Dayton, you have to drive through Indiana, and Indiana is a very conservative state, and has been for a long time. And yet, you drive through Indiana and you pass between Dayton and Chicago, you pass 2 or 3 massive solar farms along I-70, and then you pass on 65 north near Lafayette, Indiana. You pass what has got to be the largest collection of windmills that I've seen anywhere in the country. I mean, there's hundreds of them in this huge stretch of open Indiana prairie and cornfield that is really amazing to see. They go on, you drive for 10 miles, it seems like, and you're passing windmills, the giant, big, beautiful white ones, you know. And in a place like Indiana, where you would think that might be where, you know, you would get some, I don't know the history of those things or why Indiana is special. I know that there's no place in Ohio that has that size of wind farm. And like I said, Indiana's politically a very conservative place, and yet the market has somehow led it down this path where it is taking advantage of these 2 clean green technologies on a fairly large scale, and that gives me some kind of hope. Yeah, maybe I'm being naive or silly, but I feel good when I see those as we're driving up there. So who knows? I don't know. But thanks for the newsletter this month, Jeff. That was a tasty one.
Well, thank you. And this is April. It was a busy, eventful month. It's been fun talking
right.
about these things.
That's right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I did remember one other thing that wasn't in the newsletter that I want to mention, because you turned me on to the political newsletter by Heather Cox Richardson, which
Yes.
is really good. And I read it every day in my inbox. She mentioned the other day, and even though I'm a history guy, I had forgotten April is when the Civil War ended. April 9th, Appomattox, Lee and Grant met at Appomattox Courthouse on April 9th, 1865. She had a newsletter dedicated to the end of the Civil War and told the story of Grant and Lee meeting. And
she did. It was an interesting newsletter. She talked about how Lee shows up in a fresh uniform and a polished sword, and Grant woke up that day with a migraine headache and put on the same clothes he had the day before, and they ended hostilities. And just sort of the juxtaposition between, the two sides.
Yeah, we could have a whole conversation about Grant and Lee sometime, but it was a good newsletter. And I didn't mean to suggest that there was anything wrong with the Sharpen Up newsletter by forgetting about the Civil War, because I had forgotten about it too. But no, I mean, when you turned me on, just since we've been doing these podcasts, Heather Cox Richardson's newsletter, and I had been aware of it, but not a regular subscriber. So thank you very much.
Yeah, it is a marvelous newsletter.
It is good. It is good.
Okay, Ron,
it's not as good. It's not as good as the Sharpen Up newsletter, Jeff Bruce.
Well, thanks for that, Ron. Okay, hey, this has been fun.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna go find a ferret, and I'll see you next time.
Okay. Well, I'm getting all prepped for blah 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 day. So see you again.
All right. See you later. Be good.
Bye.